Hi everybody, this is Dr. Joseph Hammer, and we're going to move into Part 9, Cultural Competence, in our series on how to get into a counseling psychology PhD program. Counseling psychology as a profession values our own identities and the identities of others. So, identities are things like our gender, race, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religious, spiritual, or secular background, etc. And we as counseling psychologists believe that our identities can influence our mental health, how we cope, and how we're treated by other people. So when it comes to being a good therapist, I think that good therapists are aware of cultural identities, both their own and those of the client, and they're aware of which identities tend to come with privilege and which tend to come with marginalization. Awareness of how your beliefs influence therapy is another important piece of being a good therapist. We all have a perspective on the world. We all have beliefs about how the world works, what is good and right, what people should and shouldn't do, and these were very much influenced by our family and our community and the cultures that brought us up. They've put these values into us and we operate on them. And sometimes it's not appropriate to take the same values we use to judge ourselves to judge our clients. So we have to know what beliefs we walk around with and be very mindful of not inappropriately putting those on the client or pathologizing the client through those values. So when it comes to being a stronger doctoral candidate, it's a good idea for you to get to know yourself as a cultural being and how your various identities influence your life and interactions. Some of you listening to this video have already started to do this and are maybe way ahead of the game. But for those of you who these things I'm talking about, like power, privilege, and oppression and identity, is a new thing, I encourage you that if you want to apply to a counseling psych PhD program, and even just as a human being, I encourage you to start to learn more about these pieces, because I think it's a very important part of our lives, and certainly if you want to move into this profession, we talk about and do a lot of work around these pieces of ourselves. So if you're just getting started on your own cultural journey, that's fine. I encourage you to continue that. And if you're farther along in your journey, that's great too. Part of being a good doctoral candidate is also getting to know your own biases, because we all have them, and you want to know how they can subtly impact your actions. So, for example, if you grew up in the United States, which not all of you listening to this video have, but again, your own countries of origin have their own sets of norms around what groups are and are not valued in your society. But in the US, we tend to devalue people of color, and we tend to devalue folks who don't self-identify as straight, for example. And so a lot of us have grown up in cultures where we've been exposed to negative messages about people from these groups, and these negative messages have gotten absorbed into our long-term memories and can shape how we perceive and how we therefore treat people around us, including our clients. So it's really important for us to start to get to know these biases so that we can start to systematically challenge them. And again, regardless if you're a person who primarily has privileged identities or if you're a person who primarily has marginalized identities, we have all been exposed to these negative cultural messages, and so we've all absorbed them to some extent, and so that can influence how we see ourselves as cultural beings. We've got these concepts like internalized homophobia or internalized racism, that if these are unfamiliar concepts, you can read more about them. And it can also influence how we view and treat the people around us. So we want to start to challenge or continue to challenge these biases, and one such way that I've found very helpful for myself is pursuing genuine, equitable relationships and friendships with folks from other cultures. And again, for some of you, you may have grown up in contexts where you had a very diverse set of friends and a very perhaps global experience, which is awesome. For others of you, you might have not had a lot of opportunities to interact with folks in a meaningful way from different racial ethnic backgrounds, for example. And so that's something you'll want to start to do more of if you haven't, because this is one way to start working on challenging our implicit biases. This journey takes hard work, and it's a lifelong journey. People who are farther along in their journey continue to have to work at continuing to cultivate their awareness. So it's not a destination you ever arrive at where you're like, oh, I'm now culturally competent, all is well. It's an ongoing journey. I've grown a lot so far, and I still have much more growth to go through. I can definitely say that. And because of this, if you're more towards the start of your journey, and maybe you're a person who has a more privileged set of identities, you might feel like you have a lot to catch up on around this when it comes to cultural competence, and that's fine. I was definitely in that place when I started my education. What's most important, I think, is your openness and excitement about cultivating your awareness and your cultural competence, because that is what will fuel you through this process. So people who are willing to do the work, I think that willingness is what's most important. You don't have to be an expert or a super culturally competent person before you enter graduate school. It's great if that happens to be the case, but it's your willingness to grow in that direction that's most important. And finally, I want to leave you all with the idea that if this stuff feels uncomfortable, and for some of you this journey feels pretty comfortable, but if it's a little out of your comfort zone, it's a little foreign, a little new, a little strange, that's okay. That's a very natural part of the process, and the journey is very much worth it. And like graduate school itself and learning to be a therapist, there's plenty of stuff that you'll do that'll be a little outside of your comfort zone. And so just because it feels a little difficult doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, because this stuff takes hard work. So again, there's much more I could say about this cultural competence piece, but I wanted to try and strike a balance between giving you a little something to start thinking about if you haven't already, and not going into too much depth. So I hope this was helpful. Please hit that like button if you thought this was a good video, and feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel to stay updated on new content that I'll be posting. Feel free to send me feedback back channel via email, and please be sure to check out my website, Dr. Joseph Hammer, for more resources related to this video series and other stuff. I wish you the best of luck.